Hey, everyone. Welcome to Locked On Lakers for Tuesday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky has crying D'Lo replace crying Jordan as the go-to meme for Lakers fans. That's next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcast. It's always free and never behind a paywall. And Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go to join over 22,000 subscribers, many of whom are talking about D'Angelo Russell and what the Lakers ought to do with him at the trade deadline. We did not really get a chance to talk about D'Angelo Russell after the game on Sunday, I should say. Lakers beat Portland and are led in scoring by Russell, who have played another really solid game for them. So we're going to spend a lot of time on Russell today, Andy, because he is related to just about everything that else is going on. Whether you're talking about the trade deadline, he is front and center for that. Whether you're talking about Vibes Watch, which got really intense after Sunday's game, or whether you're talking about whether or not the trade deadline is messing with the psyche of the players, all of that stuff. What should the Lakers get for D'Lo? Should they trade him at all? All coming up on today's episode. Do want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. I think when a guy like D'Angelo Russell, Andy, is playing the way he is at the center of everything the Lakers are talking about the trade deadline, all of a sudden looks, like too valuable to go. Like the head snap back and forth on him has been pretty impressive, and I don't think many Lakers fans exactly know how to feel about Russell right now.
It's like we've said during both of D'Angelo Russell's stints with the Lakers, both of which we've covered. He is a very polarizing player, and that polarization, by definition, means it can swing in all sorts of different directions. And he's also a player that when he is on, and D'Angelo Russell was on against the Blazers during that 24-point win, he had 34 points on 14 of 21 shooting, hit 6 of 11 threes, 8 assists against 0 turnovers, plus 2 blocks. Nights like that, and he has been on a straight-up heater of late. D'Lo looks like the type of player that you start becoming tempted, if nothing else, to look past a lot of the stuff that drove you crazy about him. And in the case of a lot of Laker fans, because we heard from many of them after the Western Conference Finals against Denver, which was an absolute disaster for D'Lo, they didn't even want to retain him, despite the fact that replacing him with another guy at his level was virtually impossible. It was basically, we'll take our chances.
It's, the problem here is he's the only guy, one of the only guys who kind of is easily slotted in to bring in some kind of help. The Lakers are 22-22. They're clearly not what anybody wants them to be. And even when they've been healthy, you can find different numbers. We've seen the one from Cranjos McBasketball, Tim_NBA, Lakers Exceptionalism podcast, that the Lakers, I believe now, he said after the Sunday game, are 19-11 in non-back-to-back games where they have their rotation available to them, fewer than 3 guys missing. I would be curious to see what other teams are under the same circumstances, because I would imagine if you strip away some of those other things, the Denver Nuggets, the Oklahoma City Thunder, all of those teams also improve in terms of their record, and are, if the Lakers are on a 50-win pace, those teams probably are on a 50 or 60-win pace. But either way, I think what it really speaks to is just there is a growing awareness and a growing understanding that you do not automatically improve by trading Russell. That that if you trade Russell, and look, go trade the guy, it's fine. We're both, card carrying citizens of D'Lo Island, but trade him if you can get better. But that's an if. Like, you have to be able to understand that you're giving up the ball movement, you're giving up the outside shooting, you're giving up some of the scoring, and like, you have to replace that stuff or the team won't get better.
You're also too, and I think this is really important, you're giving up a chemistry with Anthony Davis, and that matters a lot. And I will beat this drum for however long D'Angelo is on this team. There's nobody that more consistently looks for Anthony Davis, and I think is aware of AD, than D'Lo. He also, though, the last few games has displayed a great chemistry with LeBron, which we saw on a couple pretty breathtaking sequences. The bounce pass he set for a LeBron alley-oop in transition, essentially like a lob to LeBron from the bounce, the fake behind the back pass to LeBron that ended up D'Lo laying up the shot himself. But he talked actually after the game about how he's recently discovered the idea that the best way for him to complement AD and LeBron is to actually play more aggressively. And to play more aggressively, not just looking to be a playmaker, but looking for his shot. And, that's something that I think it took a while, as guys who covered the last 10 years of Kobe's career. I think that often was the case with Kobe. And it would take guys a while to figure out that, the thing Derek Fisher always talked about, which was protecting your space with Kobe. And he was probably Kobe's all-time favorite teammate. But Fish used to say all the time, if you do not protect your space and establish your value that is independent to Kobe while playing with Kobe, he will steamroll you. And sometimes you got to, the best way to help Kobe is to play aggressively on your own terms. And D'Lo also talked too, and I thought this was interesting, about how he and Darvin Ham recently had a sit down where it seems like it was pretty transparent and pretty open. And D'Lo said, like, one of the things that came up was, what are the things I can do to make you trust me more, like on the floor, so you don't worry about me? I can play more. I can be part of the starting unit. Like, what do you need from me? And D'Lo didn't go into specifics about what was said, but I find it difficult to believe that at least some of what Darvin was looking for hasn't come out during the stretch, because D'Lo's been terrific.
If you look at the Lakers over the last 15 games, 12 of which D'Lo has played, he's got the second highest net rating of anybody. I'm sorry, third highest net rating of anybody who actually plays rotation minutes. He's behind Rui and Christian Wood. If you look at the net ratings of LeBron and D'Lo together, it's positive. If you look at Anthony Davis and Russell together, it's positive. And before you say, well, obviously everybody who plays with those guys, it's positive. Well, no, it's not. Like, Lakers have a lot of negative ratings over the last, if you want to look at individuals too, over the last 15 games, both LeBron and AD are underwater. So it's not like a given that your best players are going to have a positive net rating. Anthony Davis is a negative 5.6. LeBron is a negative 2.4. I think we can all agree Anthony Davis has played pretty well.
I mean, look, if you look at the entire season, even with the pronounced slump that D'Lo went through for really all of December, he still got one of the best net ratings on this team for the year. So all in all, he is having a good season. He's not having a perfect season, but I will say this: if you look at where the Lakers are right now, and which has been a lot of treading water, one step forward, one step back, going nowhere, very frustratingly slow or fast, depending on how you look at it. This team is not one guy away, does not appear, from being a contender. In a perfect world, you would look to add to D'Lo, and add another player, keeping D'Lo, keeping Reeves, keeping Rui. Like, I don't know if this is possible. I named those three guys because they're the prime trade assets. I mean, I guess Gabe Vincent, depending on your willingness to take on.
And it would be like, you have to pull Jared Vanderbilt, for example, away from that because he's not eligible to be traded this season.
Right, so. Exactly. But in a perfect world, you look to add to what you have in D'Lo as opposed to paying, robbing Peter to pay Paul. I don't know how much better, like DeJounte Murray, even if you think DeJounte Murray is a better player than D'Lo, And I think I'm not even, for the time being, we're looking to have a scouting report coming up this week on DeJounte Murray to get more in depth on that. But even if you think DeJounte is better than him, he is not so much better than D'Lo that if you sub out Murray for D'Lo, all of a sudden this team becomes one of the tops in the West.
Let's talk about that, because the concept of trading for DeJounte Murray itself and what it means to take D'Lo off the team, what you're risking there, and then how D'Lo kind of factors into Sunday night's post-game commentary around Lakers social media, which was entirely based around vibes and bad vibes and horrible vibes, which are of course Darvin Ham's fault, and we'll talk about all of it next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by FanDuel, and the NFL playoffs are just about wrapped up, but there is still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose, just for $5. And that app is easy to use. So many different ways to play and bet, like live same-game parlays. You can find bets in the new Explore tab. Make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays. And obviously, there are NBA options. As of this recording, the Lakers are 5.5-point dogs against the Clippers tonight. Anthony Davis is 151 to win MVP and 19-1 for Defensive Player of the Year. Austin Reaves has fallen to 75-1 for Sixth Man of the Year. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and make your first bet a layup.
All right. So quick reminder, Andy mentioned the game tonight against the Clippers. This is a big one. You can catch every moment, every minute of Lakers broadcasts with Sirius XM on the SXM app. Search Giants. It is a complex thing, this whole trade deadline extravaganza, and D'Lo is at the center of it. He was at the center of Vibes Watch after the game. He seemed to be giving very introspective, a lot of people interpret it as farewell addresses on the on-court interview after the game with Mike Trudell, Lakers sideline reporter, and then he gets there was the crying D'Lo social media thing that people saw where he was on the bench looking like a sad person crying. There was the introspective post-game press conference where he was wearing his sunglasses and speaking in, kind of overarching terms. Where you come down on D'Lo Vibes Watch, Andy?
I mean, the idea that D'Lo is doing post-game interviews in his sunglasses, as opposed to the other post-game interviews that he does in his sunglasses. He pretty much does all of his post-game interviews in sunglasses. I watched D'Lo's entire post-game. We didn't get into it as much last night because I wanted to make sure that we weren't just reacting to the reaction and actually going through some of this ourselves. I thought D'Angelo Russell sounded like D'Angelo Russell during post-game press conferences. He's always a pretty introspective, thoughtful. We've talked about this many times, Brian. He's a really bright guy. Like, D'Lo is a really heady guy. And I think that is very typical for him. The looked like he might have been wiping away tears thing. I feel like there's a certain amount of looking for confirmation bias there. He could have been doing any number of things, including just scratching around his eye. But there also, too, was the idea that he was looking all wistful and introspective and ennui on the bench.
Right.
And then
Rui Hachimura, like they had like the split of Rui when he's like excitedly giving like the LA, I'm gonna do it wrong, LA thing or whatever. And then like last night it was like sad LA flashing the LA sign.
It could also, that could be explained as Rui being unhappy that he went 2 of 7 from the floor for 9 points. Right.
Didn't play well, didn't play a ton. Hasn't, and generally speaking, has not had. You made a great point on Twitter about this, Andy, when it comes to the vibes thing. If the Lakers run off the floor after blowing out a terrible Blazers team, I don't know who these people are, but the Blazers had a 72, a guy wearing number 72, playing on the same court as a guy wearing 76. Like, that shouldn't happen in basketball. If you have a 72 playing at the same time as a 76, you likely have a lot of random dudes that you have no idea where they came from on your roster to sign your team really sucks.
Or they're both Dennis Rodman.
Yes, or they better be really well-known eccentrics. That's a good point. But these people were not. One of them was signed like the day before, and the other one was a guy that nobody's ever heard of. I mean, congratulations on making you the NBA, but I think people get my point. If the Lakers had run off the court, and this was your point on Twitter, celebrating this blowout win over a god-awful Blazers team, everyone would be upset with that too. I think they're annoyed that, like, look, we played well tonight. Why didn't we do that on a Friday? They're 22-22. They thought they were going to win a title this year or contend for one. They ought to be frustrated and unhappy. Why should anybody expect different?
Well, there's only, they looked more excited after the wins over the Mavericks and the Clippers. But the truth is, until this starts turning into anything sustained, I think there's only so excited any of these guys should really look after a win, because they have so much tangible evidence that it's fleeting. So there's only so much, I guess, either exuberance or confidence or celebration that one should expect from them. Again, as I pointed out, if these guys were going nuts or really looking super excited after beating a 12-win Blazers team, I guarantee Twitter would have lit up with, what the F, man? Like, what are you celebrating? But like with D'Lo, there was also too the fact that he had been on the bench looking wistful, and then Austin Reaves comes in from behind, like grabs his shoulders, like the way buddies do. Yeah, and Reaves and D'Lo are really close. Like, they just hit it off immediately when D'Lo joined the team.
That way, yeah.
Right. So that lent the narrative that D'Lo was looking down, thinking like, nothing lasts forever. This might be my last game. Who knows? And Austin's like, come on, buddy. Like, let's have fun. The other way.
Sunrise, sunset. It's just it. But you mentioned confirmation bias, Andy. Like so that it's there with D'Lo. Like he said, like, look, however many hours later, he's still on the Lakers, and and he hasn't moved. And in the third segment, we talk about how the deadline affects these guys. I think it's particularly relevant for D'Angelo Russell. But we talk about confirmation bias. There's that clip that went around of LeBron supposedly calling timeout himself to get himself off the floor because Darvin Ham was just so out there, like so addled in his hands, and he couldn't get his hands out of his hot pockets, and LeBron had to do it himself. And LeBron actually responded on Instagram, I think it was, like, no, he told me he told the foul and then call timeout. And so that's what I did. Like, this time of year, whether it's stuff like that or the thing that's been going around with the screaming guy in the top corner screaming about how bad the defense is and how awful Darvin is and all that kind of stuff, it's kind of gone viral around. And then like 3 or 4 smart people point out, like, most of this is wrong. It is a time to be, in the same way you have to watch for fake Woj, you have to watch for fake analysis on stuff like this too.
But look, okay, coming up though, I do want to acknowledge that there is an elephant in the room this time of year that is real and does affect teams, which explains why, even though both of us think a lot of this is people reaching for the conclusions that they want.
Right. And ignoring, by the way, like the celebration when D'Lo bounced the ball to LeBron, they're slapping hands and all that. The bench went crazy. Like, there's a lot of happy moments in there too.
He realized on the bench it was the last time he'd ever do that, and that got him down. But
never be able to bounce a ball to LeBron.
Right. But there is a reason that you could come to these conclusions, and we'll talk about them next. Locked On Lakers is brought to you by Prize Picks, the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America. And instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you just pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. And with basketball coinciding with the NFL playoffs, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League, created specifically for projections that include 2 or more players from different sports or leagues, like LeBron and Travis Kelce at a 10.5 combo of 3-pointers made and receptions. And with the Prize Picks reboot policy, your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured for NFL games, NBA games. If you have a player who exits the game in the first half, doesn't return in the second, that player gets rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with injury insurance. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy.
There is a difference between adding significance to things, assigning meaning to things from your television screen based on the fleeting moments that something happens to be captured, and ignoring the other parts that might not be captured, or the parts that were captured that just don't fit the narrative you're constructing. There's a difference between that and overreacting, which I think both of us are saying people are doing, and saying that there's nothing going on that impacts vibes, particularly around the trade deadline, and particularly around D'Angelo Russell, who I think, Andy, we would also both agree is uniquely impacted by trade deadline talk relative to other players on the Lakers.
I mean, first of all, he is as hyper aware as anybody on the team that trade deadline time could mean moving, because he has been moved by every single team he's ever played for, including the one he currently plays for. So he knows that this is real. It's a disruptive time for players in general. Like, I remember during LeBron's first season with the Lakers, when leading up to the deadline, LeBron was making it perfectly clear that he wanted to be playing with Anthony Davis, and he wanted the Lakers to go get Anthony Davis, and he did not give a rat's ass how the Lakers went about doing it. No. Go get me Anthony Davis. That led to a period where the trade rumors were all just rampant with this whole team. Remember one of the games, I think it was Indiana, that the crowd was chanting, LeBron's going to trade you. Rajon Rondo talked after the deadline passed about how that period was stressful for him. Rondo was probably like a 15-year veteran in the league who had been through basically everything you can, including getting exiled by a team with Dallas. There should be nothing that rattles a guy like Rondo, yet that period was stressful because the idea of forced relocation, even though it's part of sports, nobody likes it. So if you're asking me if I think the deadline has guys hyper aware of their future or lack thereof with the Lakers, yes, of course it does. But that's, I think, also pretty common for most players, or at least most teams. There's somebody dealing with this.
And when you're Russell, you signed a contract. The second you signed the contract, you were already put back on the block. And understandably, if he wanted to have more security, maybe there was another deal he could have signed that had more years attached to it. But, there was almost guaranteed to be put right back on the trade block, no matter what kind of deal he signed, because, the commitment of the Lakers to Russell, versus other players, of Lakers fans, of whatever, to whatever degree that stuff matters, it was less than the ideal. Oh, well, Rui Hachimura is part of our future, and Gabe Vincent's part of our future, Jared Vanderbilt part of the future. Russell didn't get that. When you are traded as often as he is, these are prideful people, and Russell is a very good basketball player. He has made an all-star team. Is he a perpetual all-star adjacent player? No, he's probably a step below that. And as Kenny Casey on 2369 points out on YouTube, he's still not athletic. He can't defend the perimeter. So in the playoffs, he's still going to be a liability, and he's not going to show up in the playoffs if we get there. Something right there to talk about. He's going to disappear in a big game and is real close, or a real close game. Look, we all know I might disagree with some of that analysis. He played pretty well in 2 of the 3 series last year, but we all know, point being, some of his shortcomings, and that he can be played off in a playoff series. But he's a really good player. And the idea that he's just one of these guys that's going to be shuffled throughout the league, that hurts your personal pride as a player. I don't think he wants to be traded again. I don't think he wants to leave the situation that he's in with LA. I don't think he wants to be routed to a third team, because Atlanta doesn't really want him, as is the reporting that came out over the weekend and into Monday. So yeah, he's not going to come off as super excited when every day he's getting different reports and hearing from his agent and talking to people. It's like, well, yeah, no, if they can find it, but like nobody wants that. You don't know if you're staying, you don't know if you're going, and you really feel like nobody appreciates what you actually bring by the 13th time you've been traded.
Yeah, I was going to say, especially when it feels like you getting traded would be fait accompli if only there would be another team that actually wanted you or like didn't feel like your contract was a pain in the ass, even though it's not even that long or that, by NBA standards, that pricey of a contract. Right. Like stuff like that, when you're a player like D'Lo, who is, if nothing else, a talented offensive player, and we've seen enough evidence over the years, even with his flaws, that when he gets going, he can be a difficult guy to contain. And the Lakers, since D'Lo has arrived, he's been their X factor. Like when D'Lo is on, more than any other player not named LeBron or AD, this team looks more dangerous. And that, like, wherever you think Austin Reaves is in the pecking order, and he entered this year clearly as the perceived number 3 guy, and he did the photo with LeBron and AD, and Reaves can play very, very well. And there have been times where his play has elevated the Lakers in important games. I still don't think Reaves raises the ceiling of this team the way D'Lo does.
No, and he doesn't, because D'Lo elevates the way the offense runs and has the capacity to score 34 points like he did last night. You said something that's really interesting though about, the length of his contract, and he's got a player option for about 18 million next year that, the consensus seems to be he's going to pick it up. So if you trade for him, you at least have to do it with the idea that you're going to have him for one more year. It's interesting. Like I want to wait for the scouting report and people who've seen more of DeJounte Murray than I have. I do not spend a ton of time watching Atlanta Hawks basketball because I'm not a self-hating, masochistic type person.
Why should you be any different than anyone in Atlanta?
Exactly. And so I don't know the ins and outs of how he plays on a day-to-day. I know his statistics for fantasy basketball. That's it. But it's like, one thing I will say, if you're looking for an appealing, kind of low-key appealing reason to trade for Murray, it actually is because he's on a fairly reasonable contract that has more years on it. And the Lakers started down the road to continuity this offseason with, Hachimura and getting the band back together from last year. But the D'Lo part of it and some of these other things, they're still not set. And like looking at it, where like you could anticipate a core of 3 or 4 players for the next few years. Right now, it's AD, LeBron for however long this lasts, and Reaves. And then there's a hole there. There's a hole in that third spot. And then there's also a hole in the eventually vacated LeBron space. So one of the actual things that appeals to me about Murray is actually that the Lakers could keep him for a few years. I would then just hope he's good because there are things about his game that make me skeptical, and some of his statistical changes, things I've read and whatever. But it's funny, like that's actually one of the things that makes this situation kind of interesting. It's like, if you're looking ahead, if the Lakers sacrificed D'Lo, can they do that? Can they make a change that actually helps make them more stable and give them continuity? We talked about things that I would want from the team. I want clarity out of the trade deadline to not overcomplicate Darvin's rotation from day to day. But that would actually be another nice little thing, like helping add to the core going forward.
I mean, it has to work. And
right, exactly. Sure.
Right. But the reason I say that, though, is, they talked so much continuity heading into this season, even with everybody knowing that D'Lo and Rui, and even to some degree Reaves, and Vanderbilt, if nothing else, the following year once his extension kicks in, these guys all had tradable deals. They were all considered reasonable enough movable deals. There still was the idea that continuity was part of this year's plan. And unsaid with that is because we think it's going to work. You only plan on continuity if you think your roster is actually going to perform the way you would expect it. Part of what's gotten in the way of what I think may have been genuine plans for continuity, or at least genuine cautious optimism for continuity, is they thought they'd be a hell of a lot better than they are right now.
Yep. That has been, this year has been, all of these numbers where you can point out, mention the one in the first segment about how they playing when players are healthy and they're not on a back-to-back and all the, and like, oh, look, there's some stuff there. And then you see them beat the teams that they've beaten recently. You know, a lot of their 22 wins are against very good teams. And then you look at it and you look at the teams they've lost to and their inability to do certain things from a game-to-game basis. I don't think they know. I think they don't have nearly enough clarity about what this roster is to make comfortable decisions right now at the trade deadline. And that is something that should make most Lakers fans nervous. Huge game tonight, Lakers versus Clippers. This is the hard game, as the Lakers have a couple more winnable games at home. And it's like Chicago. Who is the last, Andy, of the home games? I got off my schedule.
Chicago and the Bulls are the last of the home games,
right.
And then they go to Golden State, and then they have Utah and the Hawks. Rockets and the Hawks.
Yes, thank you. So a lot.
3-game road.
It's the Clipper game. Winning this one on a Clippers home court with a Clippers crowd would be a big deal for the Lakers. Of course, you can catch every minute of that game, every minute of every Lakers game with the hometown broadcast on Sirius XM on the SXM app. Search Lakers. We, of course, will be back after tonight's game to break it all down. Hopefully a meaningful Lakers win. We'll see everybody tomorrow.